Hello, this is Zurek. I read The Lost Girl recently and I really enjoyed it, and it is living all comfortable without a cent of rent in my head, so I thought I'd make a video about it. This is my first book review on my channel, so bear with me. So background. The Lost Girl by D.H Lawrence was started in its initial draft form in 1912, left basically untouched between 1914 to 1919 at Lawrence's wife's relations in Germany, and then heavily revised and finished in 1920. The novel centres on the character Alvina Horton and her efforts to strive against the boring, dull, northern mining townlet of Woodhouse and the societal constraints that were expected of her as a middle-class woman of the early 20th century. This was kind of time where she would be, expected, like her mother, to wear like shiny black bear's fur and pass silent and shadowy down the streets of life. In the backdrop of the narrative is the First World War, which kind of looms like fate and comes to the fore near the, end of the novel. The entrance of the First World War brings a sense of the world ending as you know it in the book, and suddenly becoming something entirely new and horrifying, but actually importantly, new. This change, where the vast world was in one of its convulsions, parallels really well with Alvina's struggle against the set expectations of the Edwardian era. Of the looming war, Alvina is shown to think that somewhere she believed in the convulsions. The event elated her. Like her passing thoughts of the war, Alvina would rather fall to complete labefaction, which means deterioration or downfall, than continue in a society that was stagnant and uncompromising in its social mores and conventions. This is especially if there is hope that past the convulsions there would be the peace of belonging and happiness in being able to suffer and feel and delight authentically. This desire to be able to live authentically beyond the bilboes, fetters, handcuffs, shackles, restraints of all kinds of society, and the station you're born in was one of Lawrence's motivations for writing the novel. Lawrence put forward the question, what does it matter if one is poor and risks one's livelihood and reputation? One can have the necessary things, life, love and clean warmth. The idea that one had to do the extraordinary, had to risk this destruction for a fulfilling life, is eluded in the novel. Ordinary people, ordinary fates, but extraordinary people, extraordinary fates, or else no fate at all. The all-to-one pattern modern system is too much for most extraordinary individuals. It just kills them off or throws them disused aside. There was no hope for Alvina in the ordinary. If help came, it would have to come from the extraordinary, hence the extreme peril of her case. One of the main conflicts that Alvina goes through is that though she strives to not live a boring, inauthentic life, she doesn't know what she is actually striving towards. In rejecting to a marriage proposal which would have been typical to accept, Alvina reinvents herself at different times through her story, first as a nurse, then as Eleni, a piano player and a member of the vaudeville troupe Natachi Tawara, I apologise that I'm saying that wrong completely, who themselves, in effort to cement the found family element of the troupe, embodies the Red Indian characters they played as part of their act, but off stage as well. There are at points a desperation in Alvina's constant reinvention of her sense of self. As she studies to become a nurse, for example, she could play the part perfectly. Of her mind, manners and changed personality down to the physical level of appearance and gesture, it's written, the food was objectionable, yet Alvina got fat on it. The air was filthy, and yet never had her colour been so warm and fresh, her skin so soft. Her companions were almost without exception vulgar and coarse, yet never had she got on so well with women of her own age or older than herself. She was ready with a laugh and a word, and though she was unable to venture on indecencies herself, yet she had an amazing faculty for looking knowing and indecent beyond words, rolling her eyes and pitching her eyebrows in a certain way. Oh, it was quite sufficient for her companions. She swung her haunches and arched her eyes with the best of them. But though she could play the part, it created an inauthenticity that was described as literally sometimes maddening. In doing her work as a student nurse at a hospital where she went and helped with cases, attended lectures and demonstrations, her voice had the right twang, her eyes the right roll, her haunches the right swing. She seemed altogether just the ticket, and yet she wasn't. It would be useless to say she was not shocked. She was profoundly and awfully shocked. Her state was perhaps largely the result of shock, a sort of play acting based on hysteria. Yet, being who she was, a middle-class lady from the mining townlet called Woodhouse, where she was born, was a state of stagnation which was no better. This was in a practical sense because no one in her town would actually hire her as a maternity midwife because they already knew her as a Miss and not Nurse Horton. In this case, if the saying a prophet has no honour in his own country is true, then one could say that the opposite, a Miss, has no meaning of simple work in her own society, is true for Alvina. As so, the more she lost her crafted identity as a nurse, the more she lost her bounce, her colour and her flesh. Gradually she shrank back to the old, slim, reticent pallor with eyes a little too large for her face. Her family home, Manchester House, has settled down on her like a doom. The stagnation seemed to also affect Alvina's sense of inner maturity. For Alvina, the slow years crept around, and the complete coil of each one was a further heavily strangling noose. In Alvina's pigtails of soft brown, the grey hairs were already showing. True enough, she still preferred to be thought of as a girl. And the slow-footed years, so heavy in passing, were so imperceptibly numerous in their accumulation. Lawrence describes Alvina's wish to progress forward, but her indecision in where to go best, when he writes, the trouble with her ship was that it would not sail. It rode waterlogged in the rotting port of home. All very well to have wild, reckless moods of irony and independence if you have to pay for them by withering dustily on the shelf. Another major theme in The Lost Girl is the different types of love and attraction that Alvina encounters in her life and which one feels most authentic to her. There are feelings of love which is created out of Alvina's desire for excitement, something new. This is shown through Alexandra Graham, an Australian medical student whose confessions of love she found both fascinating and repulsive. Alexander embodies a strange borderline, especially when young adults are first falling in love, where love and disgust, which we now call in modern day the ick, flip around rapidly. Alvina was not sure whether she hated the repulsive element or whether she gloried in it. Albert Whittam was also seen as repulsive but exciting, or at least an avenue for a more exciting life than the one that she was inhabiting. He is described often as a fish, a tall and thin and brittle lemon soul, but she might have married him. He would have been a strange fish, but were it not better to take the strange leap over into his element than to condemn oneself to the routine of a job? He would have taken her to South Africa, a whole new milieu. Perhaps she would have children. She shivered a little, and yet, why not? Why not his curious, pale, half cold-blooded children like little fishes of her own? Why not? Everything was possible and even desirable once one could see the strangeness of it. Once she could plunge through the wall of the aquarium, once she could kiss him. Alvina is also seen to consider a relationship with Dr. Mitchell, a bootstrap-rich Scottish doctor living in Lancaster who was loud, rash and condescending in his benevolence towards rough labourers he treated. The chapter that establishes their relationship together is called Honourable Engagement. Clearly, this relationship represents a sense of stability, comfortability and suitability of someone of Alvina's social station of birth. When Alvina thinks of him, she thinks of a sure position, a very nice home and lovely things in it. And of course he'd adore her. She was as fussy as if someone had given her a lovely pair of boots. Mitchell, it seems, was less someone for Alvina to love, but someone to accessorize her life with. And then there is Ciccio, Italian vaudeville actor who is the very image of deep, mysterious, spellbinding, unknowable passion. He's described with wild, yellow, tawny cat eyes that looked furtive and predatory, like some creature that was watching her for his purposes. Sometimes his physicality and Alvina's attraction to him is described at points as animalistic, savage, where he is naked to the waist in war paint and brandishing a long spear, and was described as extraordinarily velvety and alive on horseback. Alvina's development through the novel lies heavily in her decision in what she is wanting in her life in terms of romance, whether she wants it to be based on the excitement of leaving her boring home life, the stability of middle-class society, or the deep passion of a southern European man, even if he was of low social class. I absolutely love the writing in The Lost Girl. It is rich and full of specific detail. I especially like the extensive attention Lawrence gives to the descriptions of the clothes in Alvina's father's, James Horton's, fine goods shop. Just like the detailed names of the different types of cloth, man. E.g. the possibilities of a pad of green parrot's tail feathers, or of a few yards of pink peel trimmings, or of old chenille fringe, and the Maximus mention of tapes, ribbons, braids, buttons, feathers, jabots, bustles, appliques, fringes, jet trimmings, bungle trimmings, bundles of old coloured machine lace, many bundles of strange cord in all colours, just perfect descriptions. The various descriptions of nature and being in nature are also extremely beautifully worded. When Alvina comes up from a mining shaft, it is so easy to picture the shine and brightness in her descriptions of the world being a velvet surface of golden light, velvet pile of gold and pale luminosity, and strange beautiful elevations of houses and trees and depressions of fields and roads, all golden and floating like an atmospheric maiolica. The novel takes a while to involve Alvina in any meaningful way, and even when it does, the plot progresses kind of slowly. So if you're looking for a plot-heavy novel, it's not quite the one that I would go for. But if you're looking for a novel that authentically and with extreme nuancing manner depicts the dogged struggle of seeking freedom, happiness and love in a stilted and suffocating environment, then you would not regret reading this. I really hope you enjoyed my review. Have you read The Lost Girl? Tell me in the comments. Anywho, thanks for lending your ear, and I'll see you next time. See ya!